Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another episode of Redacted, the show where every album has a story. This month I'm actually going to be doing something in the spirit of a concept for the show that I've done a couple of times, in this veins of bringing together Twerp's Believing in Your Dreams Tonight, or 9 Inch Nails' The Background World, which is to bring together a handful of smaller releases into one more traditionally full-length vision that keeps the spirit of those little releases in check and just tries to play with sequencing in a way where the mood feels complete. It is also relatively within the themes of 2015 was a long time ago, considering the first of these 3 EPs was released in 2015, even if the subsequent 2 dropped 1 year after the next. The artists of these EPs in question, Aesop Rock and Homeboy Sandman, coming together under the project pseudonym Lice. The EPs are the self-titled Lice, the sequel Lice 2 Still Buggin', and the three-peat Lice 3 Triple Fat Lice that I'm pulling together into one vision under the title Buggin'.
Katz better never doubt the dollar bin, aka the promised land.
Katz better use a word to clarify apartment letter when they place their order. Katz better keep a point.
These two coming together really feels like no surprise. Both of them have this off-the-beaten-path style of both songwriting and rhyme style that I think pair incredibly well together. I'm glad that they have this chemistry that feels so palpable. And they've done other releases post these EPs under the Lice moniker. I just brought these 3 together because this felt like a purposeful trilogy that I would love to see them sort of do more of, because after this they've only done a couple of select songs. But these 3 EPs are just a really interesting sort of experiment of sorts, because it's got, you know, a little bit of autobiographical reflections on both fronts. It's got some interesting imagery that ties into the feeling of being a bug, and it's got this production that sort of suits that headspace as well. My goal when bringing these 3 together wasn't to do what I've done with other projects in the past, and that sort of paint a narrative or tell a story, so to speak, with a record, because a lot of records have more than meets the eye than just the surface level lyrical touch. My goal was more to keep the vibes in check, so to speak. It was to create a project that felt like a really nice A to B experience, have a sort of mood that sort of shifts, you know, because when you're listening to a record, there's some chord ideas, and there's some, like, stage setting that goes on in the sonics that lends to different pockets of the records, and I would argue there is a feeling amidst the tracks that gave me the idea of bringing them together to create that kind of stage, so to speak. You know, there's a real interesting use of sonics that lends to like an album feel when bringing them all together. That doesn't necessarily mean like Lice 1, 2, and 3 are in a sequential order, so to speak. I did shuffle up all of the track listings and made what I would say is a really fun listen if you like Aesop Rock and Homeboy Sandman and what they do together with Lice, but I'll let you be the judge of that by taking a look at the track listing. My version of Lice is 15 tracks and 51 minutes in length, so I'm going to break it down track by track after showing it off right now.
All the time, Ace.
Well then grab the microphone, I'm late for my own way.
Will do. Just write down the address where I can bill you.
Katz better learn to do the worm before 6th grade. Same age, fix your man's fade and make a mask at a pig face. Katz better not leave, they fit it on. I don't ever get too comfy. I don't like to own much stuff. I ain't really wanna untap stooge, rock the pontoon, lash move, Don Clobber the chronically obtuse. Put down the telephone around a crow and double back.
Mysterious malady, I put all my effort towards symptoms I'd be absent from the message boards. Someone made a snot remark with Noah's Ark. I did not complain through. Papa John's looking pretty good, man. Domino's even looking okay on TV.
It looks better than the game.
They got the Burger King.
I'm covered in that grit, covered in that sludge, covered in that muck.
Somebody should have told ya. Up there something looking like a young somebody older. Who keep a toolbox in his tube socks? Who keep a bone? I'm no good for acting, except for acting up. You can catch the acupuncture if you act a punk. Pack him in and pack him up. Jump around.
On the heels of obscene evil, as easel as meteoric as Beanie and Steve Zissou. I only move aside for the sun. My search history ain't glamour and glitz, more rent plans. And can a man be a witch? One Stan Smith, 5 toes curled in the sand. Free a bird from say what?
So back up off, forget it all.
Say what?
scared. Get Israel and Palestine squashed it. Bumping from the wintertime to autumn during morning, noon, and night. Till you're old and never get another coastline.
All grown up, long road, no fluff. Piece of work, eat the turnbuckle like a roast duck. Post punk, play the back, raider, rudder.
So strange.
My biggest challenge when organizing this track listing was more where I was going to put the intro tracks to each EP. I wanted to have them kind of spaced out relatively symmetrically, or at least as symmetrically as I could with the amount of tracks here. But I didn't know which one was going to be first, and honestly, the sort of off-kilter piano of Pins and Needles, I think kind of introduces the concept of these two really well. It's got a fluttering twinkliness that evokes bugs, and I think that, like, the trading and homage to A Tribe Called Quest between Sandman and Ace and the hook of the song, I think also is in the spirit of these two working together, and I think sort of establish characters, so to speak, and just general inspo, so to speak. Because I do think the chemistry between these two, while a bit off-kilter in some instances, is very much evocative of Fife and Tips from Tribe Called Quest. I also think that, like, the running late motif in the end of the chorus also, I don't know, just kind of feels like a good starting point. It's got the idea of imagery behind it that I think starts off Triple Fat Lice really well, but I think is a good catapult for this project that then kicks into high energy with Katz, a song where they sort of pivot more outward in a personal sense. While there's some bars between Sandman and Ace on Pins and Needles that sort of speak on things happening in the world as it's been throughout the Trump administration's first run, I think Katz more has this almost braggadocious energy that I think helps carry the kineticism of that instrumental with its organ loop really splendorously. It's also the second track on the first slice, and I think it's a good second track on any sort of outing out of the rest of them. So I put it at this point because it felt really apropos. While this would normally be a point where I keep the energy going, so to speak, in a Redacted, I'm a big fan of that. If you're gonna light the fuse, let it run, but there isn't a whole lot of, like, high energy amongst the Lice collective EPs, so I wanted to disperse it throughout just to keep some dynamics, and I mostly use them as, like, boosters through the experience, so to speak. But from there, I put the listener back into the groove throughout Comfy and Oatmeal Cookies, the latter of which being another wonky beat-driven song that actually has, like, some theming with the being a bug lice thing furthermore, with some of its gluttonous edge to some of the bars, something else that crops up on another track a few tracks later. But I wanted to have this little pocket to be a point where we just get muddy and mucky in some gritty instrumentals that have again just some really good palpable bar spinning between the two. Comfy is a song that honestly feels in line more with Pins and Needles as far as tone and mood. And I feel like following some of the more aggressive tendencies on Katz, it's just a nice welcome back in to the groove while keeping the lyrics and tone in check before pivoting into Oatmeal Cookies that then kicks the energy once more after that with Vertigo, the first track from the first Lice. So one of the other Lice samples comes back into the fray, and while that song on the original Lice acts as a stage setter more to the bar trading that these two would illustrate, I more use it as a point to, again, ignite some fire. I really think it's honestly not a great starter amongst the EPs. It might be my least favorite, but it is still a song with some electrifying chemistry. The bar trading that happens on here, it very much evokes, again, that same Fife and Tip energy. It's just in their own avenue. And I more use it as sort of like a bona fide interlude of sorts before going back into that gluttonous side with Pizza and Burgers. A song that has the sort of closing end to this sandwich of sorts with Oatmeal Cookies, Vertigo, and Pizza and Burgers thematically. You know, it's got this intro that leads into the lice gluttonous, bug gluttonous edge, and has bars that more dip into gluttony of different senses, while also speaking on criticism and being criticized. It's an interesting sort of flip into that gluttonous style hook of I could eat pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat. But it's an interesting sort of
end to this that also has a sort of duology with its instrumental with it and the next song, Mud, because both are very guitar-driven, and the sample from Pizza and Burgers almost goes well into Mud, in my opinion.
A song that, again, taps into that feeling of being stuck in the mud, something that, again, feels very evocative of living like a bug, but it's used as a metaphor for hard work, so to speak. The hard work leaves you covered in mud, which I don't think is necessarily a bad place to carry some of the energy from Pizza and Burgers, and it's far less gluttonous than the last couple of tracks, but again, it still has that flutteriness that evokes bugs oh so well. And that bug feeling sort of permeates throughout the hook of the follow-up song to Mud on my version, Environmental Studies. An instrumental that has a little more of a softness to it, but it's got a little more of a kick-up in energy from the last couple of songs. It's not quite the same ignition that happened on tracks like Vertigo, but it's a song that also sort of feels like it's carrying the mood from the hard work of Mud, of, you know, perseverance amidst some struggles or even doubt from those around you. You know, the hook talks about not being counted out, and I feel like coming after the heels of the hard work of being covered in the mud, it just kind of extends the messaging while, you know, kicking up that energy just a little bit. I also think the tones of the piano throughout the instrumental more evoke that transition towards the horizons that I feel like some albums really tap into well when it comes to placing sort of mood throughout a record. And this is an example of like pulling these tracks together and creating a pacing that feels like a fruitful A to B listening experience. It's a track like this that transitions into the real second half where the emotion, where the sonic tone sort of pivots in this realm while keeping some of the sort of imagery and evocative ideas still coursing throughout it. There's just a pivot in soul that I think it's carried further throughout the muck of Yoohoo. Again, Yoohoo being the part of the sample, but also imagery-wise feels like something you would find in the garbage bag full of bugs that could be Homeboy, Sandman, and Aesop Rock as the Lice pseudonym. It kind of feels like a B to the A that is Katz as well. It sort of talks about their... Homeboy Sandman's verse in particular talks in a very personal way about some of the struggles he's felt in that sort of realm, and I think that it provides a nice sort of other side of the coin while being covered in some warbly sounds. While Ace sort of takes Homeboy's mood and more gets reflective with it in a different sense, almost evocative of where he was taking some of his ideas on this era of the Impossible Kid. But it is a nice sort of moment where that more subdued edge sort of gets slowed down and again put into an off-kilter realm that I think welcomes in Zilch after that, a song about just kicking back and spending a lot of excess time inside, away from the nonsense. Pretty solidly. I think that the glockenspiel instrumental of that, you know, livens up the soundscape and makes it feel a little more lush, while again pivoting the groove ever so slightly. I think that it's a sort of ramp-up of sorts that then gets catapulted into Stop the Bleeding after that with such fieriness. To get it out of the way, I chipped my tooth a couple days ago. I'm okay, but I wanted to finish this video before the end of the weekend. I may have a little bit of a lisp or a little bit of a different sound to some of the ways that I say words. It is what it is. Which you'll notice that a majority of Lice 2 is in the back half or this back stretch of the track listing, and it's because I feel like when it comes to Sonic's fitting that sort of stage setting in a finality sense that I've sort of been talking about at different parts in this video, they have the most songs that feel like that. I think Zilch is just a really good song in general that I think starts that feeling, but it very much carries throughout a lot of the rest of the EP. But after that, I go into Stop the Bleeding, which is the last song on Lice 2, which I think is a little weird considering some of the other songs on that EP. But it is this, like, sort of whirlwind-style track in the vein of, like, Vertigo from Lice 1, and I sort of use it for the same reason. It's just to sort of help carry the energy. You know, it's a sort of sudden ending that which I think lets the second Lice project feel a bit, you know, more brief than maybe the others. It just has this, like, real quickness to its finality that I think should have given way to something else. And I use it to give way to a variety of more lower key energy tracks, or at least lower key intensity tracks, to carry the listener through the last stretch. Stop the Bleeding is the last, like real energetic song, and I think it's a really good song where, again, they're just trading bars with such grace that just, again, shows that chemistry just fully in form. It also sort of acts as a ignition switch after the very sort of insular feeling Zilch, and which sort of helps push this album out into the world, which sort of feels like a motif through the last couple of songs. I wanted to take that energy and push it into a lower key realm to sort of help carry the listener into this finality with what was originally a bonus track on the first Lice, a remix of the song Get a Dog by Fort Minor, a song with a little more of like an aggressive mood to sort of help act as an inverse for the next song as well. But I think it sort of helps carry some of that energy from Stop the Bleeding. It just puts it into like a more aggressive realm than Stop the Bleeding, whereas Stop the Bleeding is just a rapid-fire flurry. This really hones some of that energy into something a little more visceral. Which I think the instrumental is an interesting sort of chopping up of like a dog's bark with this hard-hitting edge that fits part of the vibe that these guys are working with instrumentally, but it is also an interesting pivot on its own merits before giving way to something a lot more mellow in the vein of Panachea, which is a song that sort of talks about peace in a dreamlike sense, and it kind of sort of fits the lower key instrumental that backs it. You know, it's about wish fulfillment across the world, it seems like, which is sort of an interesting inverse to some of the avenues this sort of, these trio of EPs have been delving into. But I think is a part that really puts a lot of weight on this, in a similar way to other parts of Triple Fat Lice, the third entry in the feeling. But Panachea in general has a real global scope that I really appreciate, and I think, and in some instances, honestly, feels more apropos than ever. But I think it's a really good song that has that sort of feel of back end of an album sort of energy in full effect, but it's in a much more lower key register. It again also acts as a nice inverse to some of the aggression seen on Get a Dog, while not necessarily losing some of that vibe or that sort of pace that song had. But this is sort of the start of a three-peat to send the album out, starting with that, but then going into the arpeggio-filled Couple Things. A song that more acts as like a credibility check. It's got this chorus of like knowing a couple things about a couple things, while having some biting jabs throughout some of the verses, while being this sort of song that feels like a revelation of things. It's still very low-key, and it still keeps that mellow edge, by and large, both instrumentally and tonally. But it's a nice sort of like middle piece between these two airy tracks that it's sandwiched between, because I close this project with So Strange Here, the song that initially closes out the first Lice EP, and has that sort of, again, closing the curtain sound to its sonics, its chords, and all that, while having this, again, vibey instrumental where Ace and Sand just sort of put themselves within the world that they have been talking about, especially over the last couple of tracks. It's a song that I think has the sort of rounding out that a project like this would need in general, and I think that it does a good job on the first Lice EP, but I use it as this for the same purpose. It's a nice track, and I think that as far as like sending the album out into some mellow horizons, I couldn't think of a better way to do so than with So Strange Here. And that is how I would bring together the Lice trilogy. Would you like to listen to it? There is a YouTube and Spotify link in the description. If you'd like to, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week depending on what I've got going on. I've got the next part in the Pokemon series is dropping tomorrow. We're going to try and get ourselves back on a semi-regular or more familiar posting schedule, with the listening log dropping on the tail end of the week, and a Saturday special hopefully come together by the week's end as well. Thank you again so very much for watching this. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.